Okay, welcome everybody. I want to start by acknowledging that we're meeting on Aboriginal land that was never ceded, and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging in this place, and in particular the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation that were the original inhabitants in this area, and to acknowledge the importance of the Aboriginal affordable housing campaign or pushing Aboriginal housing as being an important part of the future of the Redfern-Waterloo area. Welcome. Tonight we are joined by the community housing providers who will be looking after Waterloo South. This is a bit of a sort of a meet and greet, so this is the sort of first time they've been out publicly as a group, so it's be kind to them.
Thank you. That's appreciated.
But this is so you get to know a bit of who they are, and then as things roll on, you'll be seeing a lot more of these people. But we thought that the best way of starting this was to do a bit of an introduction as to what community housing is, and how it's a bit different from the public housing, and to sort of just provide a framework overview, and then we'll get into some questions a little bit later on. So it's a bit of, as I said, it's a bit of a meet and greet. We've tried to do this a couple of times before and we haven't quite got there, but we're now sort of 12 months so it gets into that process. There are already people who have been living in Waterloo South that have been gone through relocations and are actually with each of these providers. People are already making decisions when they're looking at relocations as to whether they go into a community housing provider or whether they want to stay in public housing. So getting some clarity around what is community housing is an important part early in the process as far as REDWatch is concerned. So I'll pass over to Margaret Malkovich. Some of you who have been around ages ago might remember that once upon a time she was in this area working what would have been...
In the last century.
Yeah. So she's worked in the public housing centre, then she went over to the community housing system. So she's from Link Wentworth, and she's going to lead the process tonight. On the end, we have Clive, who is from Birribee. So that they're the dedicated Aboriginal provider in the development. And then next to me, we've got Leonie from City West Housing, who's primarily responsible for the affordable housing, but they also have some social housing tenants in their existing tenancy. We're not going to look at affordable housing tonight. That's a whole separate issue. We want to just focus on the social housing component tonight. So I'll pass over to Margaret, and they can run through their presentation, and then we'll move to questions.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So to the presentation, okay. So what we're going to be covering is about community housing providers, the support that we provide, and also differences between public and community housing.
Yeah, speak up, please.
Okay, can you hear that?
Yep.
All right.
Well done.
I'll try and project. Okay. So we're going to cover community housing providers, the support that we provide, and as Jeff said, we're focusing on the social housing aspect of community housing and what's the difference between community and public housing, and maybe also what is the same. So what's the next slide? Next slide. This is just to keep me on track. So what is social housing? So in New South Wales, social housing is secure, affordable rental housing for people in housing needs whose needs can't be met in the private market. So this is social housing specifically. It's delivered by public housing, or Homes New South Wales as you know it, community housing providers, and also Aboriginal housing. So that's for social housing. Community housing providers are registered not-for-profit organisations We provide safe, secure, affordable rental housing for people on low, very low and moderate incomes. We manage social housing, affordable housing and other types of community housing in the community. We also partner with government to build additional homes and rent them out at affordable prices. We're governed by, I'll probably end up, this is a really wonderful presentation that Tash has prepared, and I sometimes do go off script, so I apologise in advance. So we charge the same rents as they do in social housing, where it's a rent based on income, but I think that's in later slides, so what's our next slide?
Yeah.
This one. Okay, so we work, thank you, Pat. So we work with a range of partners. Homes New South Wales, we do work closely with them in lots of communities and in different ways. We work with other non-government organisations. So it's, as a community housing sector, we do work very closely with each other, but also with agencies that support people, that mental health, community organisations, so on. We work with local councils in the private sector, and the focus of those relationships is either to support our tenants in different ways and communities in the different ways they need support, or to provide more housing and more housing products. Our goal is to support more people and also to help grow the housing supply, which is the goal of the state government as well at the moment. There's about 30 community housing providers that are involved in the housing pathway system, and that's a multi-provider system. What that is anyone can apply to be on the waiting list for social housing in the state. They can apply with any of the 30 providers or with Homes South Wales, and they'll be listed. And then we draw from that list equally. So if someone's on the top of the waiting list and there's a vacancy in one of our properties and they might have applied with Bridge Housing or Homes New South Wales, we will house them. Likewise, if we put someone on the waiting list and they choose to live in a certain area and a vacancy comes up with another provider, so it's the one waiting list and we all draw from it. There's no exclusions and it is something that's very accountable, it's audited, and we're all committed to it. And then there's a partnership with Homes New South Wales and Aboriginal Housing Office. And I think I've covered that one. That's it in a next slide. I think you can all see that one. So thanks, Tash. Saving paper. So this is the total supply. This is social housing in New South Wales, 156,417, and that number varies depending on new supply coming on board. So it's at that point in time. As you can see, community housing makes up about a third of the social housing, and Aboriginal housing is 13,000 properties. So that's the profile of who manages a social housing, which is another reason why it's really important that the housing pathway system is a system that's used to fairly allocate housing to all people. I'm trying to, sorry, Tash. So this is one that's really important. This is one I really want to importantly get across. So community housing providers, we are very regulated. We have a national regulatory code for community housing. We undergo annual compliance. So we have to demonstrate that we get regulated. We have to demonstrate that we deliver outcomes. We've got good governance. We manage our assets well. We support our tenants and communities, and that is done annually. We'll either pass or they'll find that some area needs improvement, and we will have to then submit an improvement plan if there are areas that we're not meeting the requirements of. And the New South Wales Registrar of Community Housing regulates us, but also community housing as well as public housing and every other landlord is governed by the Residential Tenancies Act. So all tenants have the same rights and obligations under the Residential Tenancies Act. So we cannot change that, and that's a really positive thing. Sort of supports or the sort of services that we deliver. Sorry, Tash, I've totally lost your slide now. But we, as community organisations, we We do vary. So we vary in size, but we also vary in the types of services that we provide. This is a range of services that as a group that we provide individually in our orgs or one or the other. So we provide crisis accommodation. We also manage transitional accommodation alongside services that support people, and transitional accommodation is people exiting from refuges. It might be young people, domestic violence. It's an accommodation for a period of time until people move, about 18 months roughly, till they can move on to something else. We also provide what we're talking about at the moment, social housing, and that's for Link Wentworth. That's the largest portfolio that we have and the biggest focus. And, you know, different community housing providers have, you know, different, some might have more affordable or social or a mix. And we also provide specialist disability accommodation under the NDIS, so that's managing that type of accommodation. And we also have affordable housing. And again, in this consortia, we provide that, and we're not going to talk about it tonight because it's going to be another session. It's a whole other thing in its own right. What is different? So, look, there's a lot. I'll go through this slide, and I think it's important to make a point that there are differences, but there are a lot more similarities.
Yeah, so we spare that in a bit.
That's very true. Okay, but now you'll go to the other side. So there you go. Public housing is owned and managed by the New South Wales government. So that's Homes New South Wales. They own it and they also manage it. Community housing providers, we either own and or manage social housing. So registered not-for-profit community housing providers will have our own stock that we manage, but we also manage on behalf of the state government. If someone is, for a tenant's point of view, they're a tenant of Homes New South Wales. If someone is one of our tenants, they're a tenant of the community housing provider and not Homes New South Wales. So we are the direct landlord for the tenants, if they're our tenants, is whether we manage, whether we manage or own it. And people at the back, if you stop hearing me, just put your hand up. So rents are generally based, so for Homes New South Wales, rents are generally based on household income. And for community housing, they're also based on household income, assessed in the same way as public housing. Community housing tenants are also eligible for the Commonwealth Rental Assistance, which public housing tenants are not, and that is also included in their rental payments. So apart from the Commonwealth Rental Housing Assistance, the rent that people pay and how we charge our rent, it's exactly the same. Government has complaints and appeals, so this is around people's rights. Government complaints and review process, they have complaints and review processes that apply to government, and people who are Homes New South Wales tenants would know what those processes are. Community housing providers have their own complaint system. So, you know, for instance, I'm the Chief Customer Officer. I've got a client relations manager that manages complaints. So complaints and appeals, and we review them. But apart from who they report to and where it looks, we pretty much have the same thing, open, transparent complaints processes. And as part of our registration, we are required to do that. But it's not only because of our registration, we're committed to that. So tenants can also lodge complaints with the minister or local members, just like they can with Homes New South Wales. Tenants also have, in Homes New South Wales, tenants have the right to appeal decisions. So if Homes New South Wales makes a decision, they don't agree with it, they can appeal. There's an internal appeals process, but there's also an independent housing appeals committee. It is exactly the same with us, except that you would appeal to us. We'd have an internal review. And then if you're still not happy with the outcome, tenants can lodge an appeal with the Housing Appeals Committee, and we have the same sort of accountability.
I think you skipped over maintenance.
Oh, did I skip those? Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, so repairs and maintenance are directly delivered. So repairs and maintenance managed and delivered by Homes New South Wales. If someone's a Homes New South Wales tenant, it's exactly the same for us. If repairs and maintenance are handled by the community housing provider, again, as I said before, same rights, same obligations. And again, it's in line with government guidelines and the Residential Tenancies Act. Did I skip anything else?
That's what I think. Skipped.
Okay, so why are there 3 CHPs managing social housing in Waterloo South? As I might refer to, but we basically, when there was an offer to join a consortium, and our organisation was really excited to apply for, were keen to manage the new social housing in this area. And as you know, I've had a very long history. And we partnered with 2 community housing, with the 3 of us partnered together because we all have different strengths in different areas. And we think that we are stronger as 3 providers because of our unique strengths. Those are things that work together. So we do collaborate, we work together, we learn from each other, but we think there's a benefit. You know, there was a question about should there be one provider or multiple, and we feel that we have different things to offer and it's a strength. And we have collectively over 75 years experience serving.
Strength. Like any particular thing for that?
Yes, affordable housing, City West.
No, that's strength. I'm talking about the different strengths.
So by having the 3 of us, there's a lot of really solid expertise in affordable housing that we can lean on. We have our affordable
sort of things. I'm sort of like, is it, you know,
quality of services, access to services, the way that we do things, the way we do things. So, you know, there's one organisation might be a bit stronger in some area and have better processes, you know, different services are delivered. It's those sort of things. So we...
I was just asking for...
No, that's all good. So, yeah, it's the way we do things.
Yeah.
And we have particular areas of expertise. So affordable housing is very strong in City West. Link Wentworth's got a broad range. And Birrabee also provides a range of organisations. And okay, all right. So that's the next one. How will we work together? So we've got a legally binding, we've entered, it sounds legalistic, we've got a legally binding agreement, but we've actually agreed to and want to have entered into an agreement that documents how we're going to work together so that we're committed to it. And, you know, we're going to be here for a very long time and we won't always be here. So as time goes on, you know, people will know why we've joined and housing organisations, 30 years, maybe 40, 50. So housing organisations will always be here. We have committed to setting up a one door, which is, so we'll still be delivering our services directly to our tenants. We're going to work here together, but we also have committed to a one door approach, which is both having a role so that anyone can approach us, any one of us at the one door. It doesn't matter who the provider is, and they can be directed to the right place if whatever services they need. And we have a long-standing partnership. We've signed up to a range of service commitments and a commitment to work together in the long run to collectively, jointly deliver services in this community. And we meet quite regularly to look at how are we approaching our service delivery, what's happening in each org. We want to work with the community and with each other.
One door, literally physical office.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. Right. Well, this is the one I really want to. So, Commonwealth Rent Assistance. That's a subsidy that eligible people who are renting and receive Centrelink payments can apply for Commonwealth rental assistance, and it's not something that public housing tenants are currently eligible for. So in addition to the income-based rent, we ask our tenants to apply for the Commonwealth rental assistance, and that's paid to us directly as part of the rent. And that means that we have some additional resources to fund services and programs as a result of that additional Commonwealth rental assistance.
In other words, your services are more expensive.
No, it means we have additional money for programs and services or repairs or additional supply.
It means the Commonwealth Government is paying contribution for the delivery of services in New South Wales through us. But the Commonwealth also provides money to Homes New South Wales through an agreement to do similar things. So it's just, it's the same pot of money, just goes in different directions and different ways. So they provide directly to the Homes New South Wales. For us, it goes via the Commonwealth Budget system.
Yeah.
So
I
that's
see,
maybe the weekly rent or the fortnightly rent will stay the same.
That's our next slide. We might put the next slide. That might explain it a bit more. So this is just a sample of what rents look like. And it's just a sample rent, just to give you an idea. So if someone's in public housing, you know, let's say their income is $532 a week. So we're using a sample income. So if people are living in, and this is just using an age pension as an example, and it might be, the numbers might be a little bit out of date because we prepared this a year ago, but the age pension and clean energy supplement would be $532.70, which both social housing tenants or community housing tenants would receive as part of their pension. But in addition to that, there is the Commonwealth rental assistance, so $106 would go to as part of, okay, we've got to move that across. So 106 is the CRA, Commonwealth rental assistance, would be added on top of the pension and clean energy supplement.
So it's a rental subsidy, it's not income, and I guess it also goes to people in the private rental market.
Yes.
To help them try and afford to rent
Pay their rent.
in the market as well.
Yep. So then when we, the rent's charged, same policy, between 25 and 30% of income based on the income that people receive. So that would be $133.17 for both. The Commonwealth rental assistance payment is received by the tenant and payable to the community housing provider. So you would be paying the $133 if you're a pensioner with the clean energy supplement, plus the $106 CRA. But the next line, this is just to show people they're no worse off. It's just an additional payment that's paid directly. And as Leonie said, that for the state government, that payment's made through a different method. It doesn't pass through tenants, but that's a whole other presentation if we need to talk about that and how sensible it is and how it isn't. But the after income is the same. Is probably the thing that we think is really important for people to note. So whatever you're used to receiving as a public housing tenant, after you've paid your rent, you will have the same amount of disposable income as whether you're in community housing or public housing. So there's a question.
Why do those areas of 25 to 30%? Where is that?
Okay, the 25 to 30% doesn't apply very broadly. It's as for higher incomes, households with higher incomes that are either in public housing or community housing, we start to charge a higher percentage of income. But it's based on higher income levels. So it's not people on benefits, it's people who are working or households that might have a number of people with larger incomes per household. Yeah.
Yep. What's the philosophy the community providers, isn't it? On affordable renting. How do you define, from your perspective, affordable renting?
It's the same as,
So we're now talking affordable housing?
No.
Social housing.
Yeah, I think the gentleman's asking a question about what's our belief about what rents are affordable or not affordable.
Oh,
And the short answer is, in a sense, doesn't matter what we believe, the policy is set by the government and the rent that we charge is mandated by the government. So they impose a policy on us and we just follow that.
Okay, but what's the policy? What is your policy?
Well, it's
that.
25% of income.
That is a normal rent. What I've been reading about is that, let's say the southern part here, Waterloo.
Yeah.
Some of the new buildings that Stockholm will build, will be dedicated to what they call affordable renting.
Yeah, that's the different,
Okay.
yeah, that's
So
a,
that's a different.
What is the percent affordable renting?
So we're going to stay away from affordable housing. That's a whole
Jeff
different
promised to do a whole other session.
We'll do another session on affordable housing because
It's a very
more
different
complicated than what
housing.
this is. But for the people in the room who are currently social housing tenants, public housing tenants, they will stay in this system, in the social housing system. And so we're focusing on the social housing system today. We'll come back and do a separate session on affordable housing further down the track because that's got a lot more other complexity to it.
Yeah.
But everybody
I think
that's
it'll
in
need a
social
full
housing
session.
tenants will remain social housing tenants.
Yeah,
And don't need to get into that complexity.
yeah, I'd recommend when we do the afford,
That's the percentage.
So
Yes, the market.
the problem is that there isn't a simple answer. Affordable housing is
talking from a policy point of view, it's a much more complicated.
So can I, it's a very complicated area, but we're a local affordable housing provider. And so it would depend on the household, and we house people on a range of incomes, including working households. On average, our rent, it's an income-based rent. On average, I collect 50% of market rent across the portfolio. So not 85%, not those numbers. That just gives you an example, because the cost of rent in the city is very high. And then if you apply a lens around people's income, you have to give them a much bigger subsidy to be able to afford to rent it. So that's just one example, but we will need.
I do really, to do it justice,
we
I
have
think
to
we
do
need a
justice.
whole session on it because there are different income streams and different,
And it depends on
types of
how
models and-
different funding programs and different rules that apply.
yeah.
So,
maybe
But it's lower than market. I think that's,
yeah.
but in very different ways
So
and more
if
complicated.
there are any questions, if people have got any questions about the Commonwealth Rental Assistance while we're on this one, we'll take those questions and we'll move on to the rest of the.
One question here.
Yep.
I just have a question because I've noticed the top one, it says age pension plus clean energy. Is that mainly directed to elderly people? Because I do believe that pension does come under people who are not elderly, like for me. I'm on taxi, so but to me, seeing that as age pension, that should be done as a typo because pensioners are not just only pensioners.
It's just an example.
No, that's a very good point, but just so I can explain what we just took one type of example. We could have taken sole parents or single people. We wanted to show just one type, but you're absolutely right. The age there are multiple types of pensions, yeah.
Like reading that, I'm like going, so I'm a pension model, so that means am I out of that category because I'm not
No.
Definitely be in that. Yeah.
Anyone earning income from Centrelink on whatever pension, it'll be different numbers, but you could put any example in there.
Yeah. What the example shows is that after the CRA, no matter what system you're in, you end up with the same take home income.
Whatever the example is included at this point.
Yeah.
I think next time we need to clarify things.
Greg?
Good morning, thanks for going up, and nice to see you again. And just, are we going to get a copy of your lives in cash? Are you happy enough to get it? And are we going to hospital again in the of this?
Yeah, we can put it up on the REDWatch website.
Yeah.
And we are videoing tonight, so that'll also be up there for people who couldn't make tonight, who want to actually go through and see the presentation.
It's comes up questions for you.
And the CRA,
If you have, but how long has this been to the community? Maybe you can answer this one. How long has this been in existence, the whole PhDs? How many years roughly?
CHP is about 40 years. Is that?
Yeah, and the sector really started to take on more management of
can you
properties.
talk up?
Number one question. With the whole thing with the federal government and the whole public-private partnership is what you've got.
Oh, you're talking about this thing here, our partnership together?
I'm just talking about CHP and you're in amongst federal government.
Okay, that's been around for about 40 years, yeah.
What happens if that changes, government policy changes, there's more withdrawn daisies? What's just happened recently with the whole change?
Well, then there's a very large community housing sector that'll be knocking on government's door.
It's just,
Look, there's perfect system. Yeah.
finish on this note. So far with public-private partnerships, you've got tollways. There's a problem, there's an issue with that at the moment. Tollways, the government wants to actually use the tolls and they can't. There's that.
So,
The beach hotel is also.
Yeah.
So that's how they fold it. What I'm saying, there's no certainty that the Nevada.
In this instance, the government will own the asset.
they'll own all the social housing.
We'll be managing it.
So the federal
Oh, okay.
So the federal government provides money to Homes New South Wales through an agreement, and then they provide, and then we get this thing called Commonwealth Rent Assistance, which is the rent subsidy. So yes, yeah. Well, nothing's ever guaranteed in life, unfortunately. Otherwise, we'd all be really rich, I think.
Can we maybe move on to the rest of the presentation?
That was it.
And
Yes.
then have
the question.
Are we more than done by the rest of the presentation?
On average.
I think it's okay.
Yeah, that's it. Is it okay?
Preference of
I've messed it up.
Yeah, so,
it's important.
yeah,
Instead of just moving us all along, moving us all, we're not tackling it.
No.
We need to be third. Thank you very much. All of regard to specifically, there are one part of speaking questions, want to get to asking. The thing that the lady there wants to get to. So if we could be more specific with things, that might be better. And also like with better examples.
yeah.
Thank you very much.
So, thank you. So, can we have a brief presentation from each of the providers, maybe?
About what?
Well, just about who you are.
Well,
What is Birribee?
after Margaret finished, I was going to speak generally about Aboriginal housing, and I'm happy to speak about who Birribee are. So far it's been about public housing and community housing, and Birribee is an Aboriginal housing provider. At one level, we're a community housing provider just like Link Wentworth. We are a Tier 1 nationally registered. We operate under the same system and broadly we deliver the same kinds of services. We do the same kinds of things. We do homelessness services, transitional housing, social housing, and we support our tenants. Our tenants receive CRA, so the same principles of the rent apply, and the rent policy is mandated by the government. The difference, there's some differences for us though, and as with Link Wentworth, we contract with Homes New South Wales for some of our social housing. But because of the aspiration of Aboriginal people to self-determination, the government has set up also a subset of social housing, which is designated as Aboriginal housing. So alongside Homes New South Wales, there's the New South Wales Aboriginal Housing Office. That was established in 1998, so it's been running for well over 20 years. And at the time it was established and subsequent to that, homes occupied by Aboriginal households that were public housing were transferred to the Aboriginal Housing Office to manage. In practice, the Aboriginal Housing Office then contracted the public housing system to manage a lot of those homes. But the aim over time was to grow a set of self-determining Aboriginal community-controlled organisations, Aboriginal community housing providers, to take on management of those properties. They're not the only Aboriginal housing properties. Land councils also own and manage and operate or contract in providers to manage and operate their own houses. So you may know back in 1977, the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council was set up just up the road where the Black Theatre used to be here in Redfern. Birribee Housing is a housing provider that's owned by the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council. So we trace our roots back to Redfern back in the 1970s. At the time, the Land Council network was set up. A lot of housing that had been owned, that had been occupied by Aboriginal people on former missions and reserves was transferred over to Aboriginal land councils. And so those dwellings also form part of the Aboriginal housing sector. So Aboriginal housing is a title that kind of loosely covers properties owned by the Aboriginal Housing Office but managed by public housing, by Homes New South Wales. Properties owned by the Aboriginal Housing Office but managed by Aboriginal community housing providers like Birribee, and properties owned by land councils and other Aboriginal housing organisations that they either manage themselves or they bring in housing providers or private operators to manage. So we manage Aboriginal Housing Office owned properties, we manage Homes New South Wales properties, and we manage land council owned properties. As I said, the policies might have minor variations between them, and particularly in the land council owned properties, they're able to set their own rents and have their own waiting lists. But otherwise, for Homes New South Wales properties and for Aboriginal Housing Office properties, we operate according to the policy framework established by the government. In Waterloo South, the properties, the existing properties are owned by Homes New South Wales, and that will continue after the redevelopment process. So Link Wentworth and Birribee will have a relationship with Homes New South Wales to manage those in the way that we are currently doing with the Waterloo Metro quarter. So, but getting to your question about the strengths, so we would say our strengths are in managing Aboriginal households, right? But we recognise our friends in the table and across the mainstream sector also manage Aboriginal households. In fact, collectively, the mainstream sector probably manages more Aboriginal households than the Aboriginal sector does. So they've got long expertise, but they also look to us to see what we're doing, to see if they can improve what they're doing. In this precinct, both Link Wentworth and City West will be managing Aboriginal households, just because there's a high demand for Aboriginal households to live here, right? So in the future, once people have been relocated, a long time in the future, when and people have returned who want to return, all of that, if there's a vacancy If it's in our property, we'll go to the top of the list and we'll tick the box which says Aboriginal households, and we'll work our way down the list. If Link Wentworth have a vacancy, they won't put that filter on, but if it's an Aboriginal household that is at the top of the list and it's their turn next, they will be offered a place in Link Wentworth, right? So we're having a conversation, often week by week, about how we manage Aboriginal households. In terms of the strengths of our partners, they've got a lot more experience than we have in terms of developing properties. City West is prolific as a developer of affordable housing apartment complexes in City West. So when Stockland come to us for input into the design and development of this process, we look to them. Link Wentworth have also got a lot more experience. Both these organisations have got architects in-house. We don't. So we look to them. We look to them for things, Link Wentworth are a much bigger organisation than us. So when we're looking to plot our growth path, we look at what systems and processes they have.
There's a building set aside in Waterloo South, isn't there? About that. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So because of the work of the Aboriginal Housing Alliance, and because it's well known by government, there's long-standing Redfern-Waterloo Aboriginal community, long-standing aspirations for people here. And Aboriginal people have been moved out by virtue of the housing unaffordability and the gentrification, right? So the government mandated a certain level of management of the social and affordable housing by an Aboriginal provider. We think that kind of arrangement is fantastic, and we encourage government to do that. In theory, so Birribee is going to manage 20% of the social housing and 15% of the affordable housing. That could be uniformly spread. We could have 20% in every building of social, for example. But you're right, there is a building in stage one, which is a smaller building. It's going to have about 20 to 27 apartments in it. It's going to it's one side fronts onto McAvoy Street, and it's in the southwest corner closest to the Macca's. On McAvoy.
Okay.
Hang on, no, there's two. So there's a smaller one in stage one.
Okay.
In that corner, that's going to be 27 apartments, we think. And so that looks like a building that is manageable for Birribee, and we are suggesting to our consortium partners, there's no firm final decisions being taken, that would be a building that we manage. But that would mean we don't have 20% in the next building, we might have 10% in that building. Right? So, and we haven't worked out all of those arrangements yet. There's also another building, which is on, I'm going to say, Cooper, John Cope, yeah. U-shaped building that was going to be done in stage 2, but is being brought forward. It's as I say, it's a U-shaped building. At the moment, it looks like it's around 90 units.
It's about 8 stories.
It's about 8 stories. And we collectively are making a decision. There's still processes going on. Collectively, we're making a decision to bring that building forward. And again, the proposal is that that's be a building that is a Birribee building.
So are they going to change their plans then? Is that because the goalpost seems to keep shifting all the time?
In terms of the bedroom configuration, the plan was it was going to be a mix of 1 and 2 bedrooms.
And in terms of the stages, I mean, you've got stage 1 and stage, so it's going to become part of
it's going to leapfrog stage 1 and probably be delivered as the first building in the precinct.
So that didn't get published.
the discussion has been going on in the background to see if it's possible. And part of it requires federal government funding. So the federal government's been approached. And in the meantime, we are fast tracking the plans for that building. And we are literally on the cusp of coming out and starting to talk to the community about that building. Because we're an Aboriginal provider, we went to the Aboriginal Affordable Housing Alliance, and I'm going to say 2 weeks ago, and we flagged to them that we're having these discussions. And
there's some private beds, private.
Immediately behind that, I think there's some private. Yeah.
As I'm saying, I'm just trying to picture where it is, because that I thought that that bit at the end between Cape and Cooper is social housing. That last bit.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
The scoping report for that project has just gone up on the Department of Planning's website. So that's the application that goes in to get the planning requirements for that building.
So look, that's well, I'll say this, one last point I'll say, and it's the first point I made. We know there's been debates about public housing and community housing. The thing that kind of underpins both the New South Wales Aboriginal Housing Act and the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Rights Act is recognition of the aspiration for self-determination, but also a recognition of the impact of colonisation on Aboriginal people, right? And so and those two things are linked. For Aboriginal people in the past through to the present, it's been the government and government institutions and agencies, not alone, but predominantly, that have had the overwhelming negative impact on Aboriginal people. Aboriginal people look to government to make redress, and the Aboriginal Land Rights Act is a recognition of that. It's a set of compensation mechanisms. The Aboriginal Housing Act has in it recognition of that aspiration for self-determination. That is, all other things being equal, Aboriginal people would rather be in housing run by Aboriginal organisations, serviced by organisations that are set up to meet their needs and are governed and controlled by Aboriginal people. The history of participation in mainstream services is often a history where Aboriginal people have had to go to the back of the queue. And so
hopefully the design will reflect that as well.
Yes, and to the extent that we can influence that design. Some of the design parameters are set, but absolutely the conversations that we are starting to have about the design of these buildings recognise the difference in Aboriginal household composition, the different ways Aboriginal people relate to each other as extended family and as extended community members. There's a whole lot of small, subtle things that we're going to be looking to build in to reflect that. Yeah.
Margaret, can you tell people a little bit about Wentworth? You ended up with the stock transfer on some of the North Shore, where that was where there was no redevelopment, just public housing was passed over to community housing to manage. Can you just say something about Link Wentworth?
Yeah, absolutely. So Link Wentworth, we manage and or own, we have 6,200 tenancies. Of those, about 5,500 are social housing. We manage about 500 affordable, and then we also have specialist disability accommodation. We also do other sort of creative, innovative things, like we have some meanwhile use properties, which are properties that are available for the short term that might be developed. So as a community housing provider, we're always looking to different ways that we can provide more outcomes for people and house more people. We had social housing management transfer. So our geography is the north. So we were a provider that was in the northern suburbs quite some time. And we also have quite a large portfolio in Western Sydney, Nepean Blue Mountains, Hawkesbury. And we will have a portfolio, we'll be managing the housing here. What else can I say about? We provide a range of services. We have communities teams. Tash was previously a team leader of that team. We have lots of partnerships. So as community housing providers, we have lots of different partnerships with different organisations, and we either house their clients or they work together. We also have a specialist homelessness service as part of our service delivery, and that's in the West as well. The positive thing about that is that we, as an organisation, we have a deeper understanding about homelessness and the challenges that people face and case management and the services that people provide. I think that's about
So
10,000 tenants, 40
years
years.
managing the housing above the metro.
Yes, we're managing
together.
that. Yeah.
And I think you're also responsible for the meanwhile use. So maybe you'd like to say something briefly about that.
So we manage the housing that came online with the metro, and everyone, anyone who lives in the community would have seen it. It's really lovely housing. We were so pleased to be able to offer it to people who were relocating. And it's is it a 20%?
For us, it's
20%.
That's one of those 20%.
20-80% split.
Yep.
And the meanwhile use is a block of 20 units. And that was really positive. We housed people who were either in temporary accommodation or homeless or refugees for a short time. We had staff to support them, but also worked very closely with a range of homelessness services. And that's meanwhile use. It was available for a period of time, and people have moved on to longer, more appropriate long-term housing solution. But it enabled them to get out of temporary accommodation or homelessness. It's, yep.
Probably for all of you, in the sense that in the area here, and I'm sure a lot of people agree that the way that the garbage and everything is dealt with these huts and things like that is a big problem. And, we've had problems with rats, we've had garbage spilling on the street because, they're in huts and people sometimes can't get in because they're locked or whatever, because they just leave them, waiting for someone else to go in and put their garbage in or whatever. So, and I'm aware that Stockton, that there is Homes New South Wales are looking at this issue in terms of the design of these buildings. So that's really, I just wanted to raise that and say that's such an important aspect, because if you've got driveways with garbage things there, you're just going to have more and more, because they're going to have a lot more people living in this area, a lot more garbage trucks and that sort of thing. So is that something on your radar? How do you manage that now?
That's a really good segue. Sam will be pleased to say this. Yes. We want to invite, and we'll leave these flyers here. There are consultations specifically about those sort of things. So looking for information about what works, what doesn't work to inform the design. There's a session on the 11th of August and one on the 18th. We'll leave the...
Is that on the chair or is it?
No, but we can
put it up, and maybe we can put up on...
Yeah, we can. So
And also this one.
tomorrow is the first one, which is at the outdoor area of the metro station.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, that's where...
That's just the first section, stage one there, isn't it? Isn't that just the stage one?
Just first time say that some of stage 2 is coming forward. So
but to your question, is it on our radar?
Yes.
Massively.
Yes.
We're in endless discussions about garbage.
Yeah. Okay.
Garbage
So
shunting
Yeah,
garbage
yeah.
around. Can the council try to
We've
get
got-
into the building? How often are they going to
that's
come?
right. And they should be getting underneath, because having them outside is just.
Yeah.
just on the flyers, down the back here, there are plenty of South Sydney Herald, and there's an ad in there which actually has those events in it. So if you pick one of those up.
That's a good question, and these are really good places to raise them. Yeah.
After the people have been relocated from the staff to the metro building, standing it's only about 70.
Yeah, homes.
Well, so some of the those building that high-rise living's not for everyone. Some people were offered, but they didn't want to take that. Homes talked to everyone to see what their preference was. A small number of people decided they wanted to move out of the area. Other people needed ground floor accommodation or accessible accommodation. Some went to City West. So over the hill and over the other side is the new Baronia apartment complex near the car dealership. Yeah. So there was a long process of working through that.
Yeah, Homes New South Wales supported there.
Homes New South Wales.
Into lots of different locations and provided.
Get shown they're going to, or
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again,
have the right views?
Yes.
yeah, absolutely. They get interviewed by the specialist relocation staff. They find out what their housing needs are, and then they look for properties that match their needs, either in a community housing or
And then have it reduced. You're going
Yeah.
to
We talk to them, we see what their needs are. You know, for us in relation to Metro Quarter, it was about who wants to be on the lower levels, maybe have a fear of heights, and who wants to be on the higher levels because they like the views. And
It's along the road. Yeah, they're lovely.
well, you can actually see, the higher you go, you can actually see quite a way around.
So this is probably a good segue just to point out that there is also funding for non-government organisations, both from Homes and from the City of Sydney, for people to work alongside people that are being relocated. Maybe just stand up and introduce yourself.
My name is Redfern-Waterloo Centre, and I'm attending that for the relocation as well. So we're currently going through phase 2. So if you're part of that chat, or if you just want to speak about the relocation, I'm happy to answer any questions.
And then Navin, stand up. People that don't know you, it works at Counterpoint here, and he's funded to also work with people around the redevelopment and relocations. And then there's also someone from Kinchela that is also funded. Just before we go on, we haven't actually heard from Leonie. And as you heard, Leonie took some of the people that were relocated out of Victoria, Waterloo South, into the Baronia apartments. So can you just give us a little bit of a quick brief overview of City West and Leonie King?
So City West has been was set up a bit over 30 years ago in the City of Sydney to specifically develop, so be a builder, and then operate what we call affordable housing. So lesson for another day, it's a very broad description that includes people on Centrelink benefits, it includes people who are working, low-income workers, so it's a very broad mix of people. We own 1,000 homes or apartments across, I think it's 22 different buildings in the City of Sydney at the moment. The most recent one we finished last year is 74 apartments at 895 Burke Street. It's called Baronia Apartments. So we have a wait list in the city. People have to be connected to the city to be eligible for our housing. But as part of this process or project, we said because we're local, we're happy to help relocate some tenants. And so we've made commitments into some of our new buildings when they get delivered further down the track. We've also committed to move people, if they want to, into some of our existing apartments. So to date, I think we've moved 11 into Baronia, which was new and opened in September last year. We've moved 3 so far, and another 3 about to move into some existing apartments. And those apartments are scattered from, Zetland, Waterloo, Redfern, Alexandria, right down to Ultimo, Pyrmont, Glebe, and Forest Lodge. So that's kind of where we operate at the moment. That's our footprint. And yes, the intention is that we will be the owners. So we will buy the affordable housing that's going to be located at Waterloo South, and BRB will be managing some of that as well.
The other thing that's probably worthwhile just mentioning in that is that City West for a long time has taken the affordable housing contributions that developers have paid to the City of Sydney, and they've been passed on to City West to establish affordable housing.
Just help pay for things. So actually, most of our funding historically has come from the city. It's getting harder, I might add, but yes, much harder.
I was going to ask you, when you're talking about owning property, how can you, if you own property and you still a non-profitable organisation?
Absolutely. We are at 100% a charity. So when we talk about not-for-profit, we're all charities, which means if we generate any surplus income, so more money than we need to run operating costs, it gets reinvested back into providing more housing. So that's the model. There's no shareholders, there's no profit going to third parties. I know we get called private entities as if we're, big private for-profit with shareholders. We're not that. We are charities. And so all the money stays within. So, for example, whenever we have, it's getting harder because it's getting really expensive to build, can I just say, in the city at the moment or anywhere? But, if there is any what we call operating surplus, it absolutely gets reinvested back into delivering services and programs and helping to try and pay for the next project.
And sorry, can I just add in relation to Grant's earlier question about what happens if everything goes wrong, and in relation to the government ownership, right, or non-ownership under say a PPP. Majority of the properties that we manage are owned by government, right? So if there's a future change of government policy, the government still owns those properties. They can bring them back into public housing. Sure. And then we'd all be working for the government. We three who have all worked for the government.
The government and the homes and the homes.
Something you bring me into this. And fact is that the government used to provide public housing, and that has been shrinking at a rapid rate. So historically, they used to do that, but they're not, and that's part of this whole movement across to public-private ownership, which is right. Hang on. You retarded by using me. No. If you brought me into this, I'm not putting it in. You brought me in, so. Can you explain that?
Okay. So it's not a public-private thing.
Well, Lenny, you asked him to explain.
Hang on.
Might not like the answer.
There's no toll road.
So I'm just talking generally. Not talking about the specific arrangement of bringing in a private developer in, right? So leaving that aside. In terms of what happens to us as community housing providers, by and large, the majority of the properties that we manage are owned by the government, right? To the extent that, just like government does, builds more, overall, there's a dwindling amount of public social community housing. And we three, as long-term housing workers, have been arguing against that for as long as anyone can remember, as you would expect, right? Our view is, generally we need more, right? But also there's provisions within the national regulatory system such that if any of us go under, and this applies if any of us go under, the properties are not lost to the system. We all have provisions within our constitutions that require the properties to be transferred to another housing provider. Right. So I hear what you're saying about motorways and all of that. And we can have an argument about how government finances these things. But in terms of our part of the system, the government has wrapped itself around that.
Can I just also add?
With respect,
all right.
Let Clive talk. Yeah. Let me retort. Up until March 2023, we were promised on the eve of that election by the New South Wales government that it was all going to be public housing. So when they came in, we did that, nothing was signed, no breach of contracts, and it's all changed.
Yeah.
And that was only within a period of
Let's take that.
then 4 years.
Yeah, that's a government question.
Well, government question.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we can't answer that.
Yeah, we can't
government.
answer it.
Well, I'm asking how you get the guarantee and how you guys,
Okay.
you've got to appoint the benefits of your system, but there's drawbacks.
So that's really a question for the minister, and the minister has responded on that question, and I'm not sure that people generally agree that the minister did a good job on the response, but people can't actually say that.
Can I ask you this?
Yes.
But you said before, but not wrong, that you had dealings with Stocklands.
You said we had dealings with.
Did the government actually delegate you to talk to them?
So
Are you part of the government?
No, we're not part of the government, although we three have all worked.
We've all worked in government.
So, yeah. No, but hang on. No.
Everyone's for the government.
The government made a decision about how they wanted to move forward here.
What happened to the land rights?
Well,
Where you said, okay, you know,
if it was up to us,
we own the land, and
if it was up to us,
we own the land.
if it was up to us, we'd put a land claim over everything.
That's
But unfortunately, the Aboriginal Land Rights Act
Limited.
doesn't allow us to
Yeah.
put a land claim. But hang on.
That's whoever.
That's a
And Metro Land Council is the local, and I don't want to speak for them. I'll make that clear. But the government made the decision. It wasn't our decision, and the government said they want a consortium to move forward with this. At which point we started talking to each other, and then knowing that everyone needed a developer partner, we then started working with Stockland.
Was the only company that went forward, or you just picked the stock?
Well, we had a look at the developers and decided who we wanted to work with. And if it had gone a different way, you'd have other faces sitting here, and you'd have Lend-Lease or Mirvac or Fraser's as the developer partner.
Probably the best.
But we like Stockland.
We like
Yeah,
Stockland.
that's right. Yeah.
And your
select
friends
right.
are here.
Are you shareholders of the club?
No, God, no.
Oh, we wish. No,
You said we like the club.
No, but
no, they're good to work with.
we like the
committed
way
to-
that they seem committed to the same question.
For a while, that gentleman that.
But we got together and worked out who we wanted
Wanted
to
to work
partner
with,
with.
yeah.
And we came to the view
And then
that
Stockland had to agree.
that's Stockland.
Before, the gentleman that had, years ago, let's say if I was in Waterloo South and I'm going to get moved to Waterloo, the only alternatives will be what they call the CHPs.
Yeah, CHPs.
No other, although you
No.
mentioned before the war about.
You could be offered a place by
30.
Homes, New South Wales. So, in the future, we're going to have new stage 1 buildings, and people from the next stage will be offered accommodation there. But if they don't want to live in a high rise or it doesn't suit their needs, then it could be Homes New South Wales or other CHPs that operate in areas where they want to be, like bridge housing, like St George community housing, like women's
Or other
housing.
providers in other areas as well.
Yeah. Don't forget that in Waterloo, you've got 450 odd units up here in the conservation area that are outside the area for redevelopment. So it is possible to actually eventually to be able to stay in public housing in the area. Possibility of stock transfer aside.
Is the government planning to refurbish those units? The 550?
So
Needs to ask the government.
there is a program at the present moment to try and refurbish some of the public housing. Who knows what will happen by the time we get.
We used to work in the government.
Yeah.
Long time ago.
Long time
It
ago.
all has-
There's a question down the back there. Yep.
Very good. Okay, issue first. Yeah, and there's an issue about what happens if the lights. Who changes the lights? There's so many of them.
Yes.
An old person that can't get up and change themselves. Is there some sort of protocol for that?
Oh, within the unit, sorry.
Yes.
Not, okay, generally that's.
It's a tenant.
Generally that's a tenant thing.
But
we do like to help our tenants. And we are in the building very frequently. I'm not offering to get up the ladder, but
There's a lot of elderly people. In
yes, no, I understand.
Yeah.
Want to know the answer to that.
I understand.
Can't pay handyman.
Well, we could. Well, we could.
Yeah,
But
the tenant.
Do you?
well, yes, we do that kind of thing.
Sometimes
Yes, certainly.
we link people to services that can help them.
So, if you have something that needs immediate addressing, yes, call us and we'll work on a way of solving it.
People I've spoken to have been panicking about the fact that they may have to fork out of their own pocket to have a handyman come in and flood. And there are so many. It's not just one old bloke like like a flat. It's heaps. Yeah.
Yeah, look,
It's very technical.
yeah, no, I've got unchanged.
And you better some.
My place. So if there's a handyman that's available, I'll be getting that.
I presume it's not going to happen for a long time because they're probably it's all new.
No, that's right. But look, we regularly have our tenancy and our asset staff in the building. And I am sure that we would hope that our older or less mobile residents aren't clambering up on ladders and that we will find a way to solve that problem with them. Absolutely. We manage properties all across the state, from Moree in the north, down the coast, into Wagga. We're experienced with elderly tenants. We sometimes have to discourage them from getting up and cleaning the leaves out of their gutters. Or if there's a spot of mould in the top of the bathroom, we don't want people with 1 foot on the bath and 1 foot on the hand basin. So we help our tenants solve those kind of problems.
So one question that came up in the Waterloo redevelopment group, which I guess is reasonably sort of common around the place, is concern about antisocial behaviour and how it is that CHPs handle antisocial behaviour, and do they do it any better than what homes do? Does anybody want to response to that?
Stay away from do we do it any better? Because I don't think that's a fair question. But we do, we manage it, we have processes to manage it that comply with the Residential Tenancies Act. So if there's antisocial behaviour, we try and understand why that is happening. So sometimes it's because someone's got mental health issues or addictions, and sometimes it's just antisocial behaviour. Our first action is to talk to people and say, you're making a noise, you're doing whatever it is, and, remind them of their obligations and that do they need help. And if we need to, if it continues, then we gather evidence and we take action through the NCAT. Our goal as community housing providers is not to end tenancies, but we also know that there's an obligation. People need to live harmoniously in the community. And so we work to try and help those people, as well as ensuring that the community has harmony.
And
it's a challenging area to manage.
And if possible, try and refer people to the right support services to help. That's
community justice. We work with the police. We do all sorts of things to guide.
I know the area well, I know the buildings well, and I know that there's cameras in certain places. But is there going to be more security in that respect? Because the security is pretty lax in lots of ways. But everybody, people living in the neighbourhood, people living in the apartments, I've heard some awful stories from people. So, and maybe there's a deterrent if you have them in the corridors, for example, when you're, that sort of thing. Is that going to be looked at?
In the Metro Quarter building, there are CCTV cameras
In the corridors as well?
in the foyer and in the corridors.
And again, I'll promote come here and talk. That's the thing we're looking at. What's going to make a difference?
Yeah, I reiterate what the services that we provide. So my role is the services engagement manager for Link Wentworth. However, we don't differentiate who we talk to. So I talk to the tenants, any tenants, future City West tenants, and also New South Wales tenants at the moment who has some questions around things. One of my staff members is actually a specialist support person. So if something like that happened, you've met Dion before. She's like, yes. So speak to Dion, and then Dion will find the best way in supporting things like that. So it has happened time and time again within the Waterloo Metro Quarter. There is people need simple things that, possibly they thought, I have to pay for it myself. But if we have a conversation with each other to the tenants through the tenancy manager, then they can bring Dion in, and then that's within my merit. And I can assure you that is happening within the Metro Quarter.
Karen and then Norrie.
Okay, I want to know about when you cease to be eligible for community housing, and specifically regarding the right to return to the redeveloped South Waterloo. So if you get relocated to, I don't know, somewhere in the West, get a job, go, I'll commute to that for a few years because then I can return to Waterloo and I'll be close to work. Will they be able to, or will they not qualify?
Yeah, so it's the government that sets the right to return policy because it's a government promise, but they are quite diligent about it. Let's put it that way. The people in Metro Quarter are on the other side of the road of the dotted line of Waterloo South. So technically, they have a right to return back across the road into the precinct. That's how diligent the government is. But again, it's a government promise and a government policy, and that's specific. There'll be a whole lot of specific examples about what if a household moves out and then a young person becomes an adult and wants to move back in, which is one of the questions we got at the Aboriginal Affordable Housing Alliance 2 weeks ago. It's up to the government to determine how that works. Yes. But generally, the government is looking to completely fulfil that promise.
Well, it's always been said, providing you are eligible with the right to return. That is my question. At what point do you stop being eligible? How much work do you have to do to stop being eligible?
So one of the differences, and there's been a recent policy change, but one of the differences between public and community housing, little known, was that public housing tenants were on time-limited contracts, tenancy agreements. Community housing, so they were 2, 5 and 10 years, and that was a reform that came in
1995.
I wanted to say 2005.
Oh no, 2000. You're right.
2005.
Reshaping
Public housing. Public housing tenants didn't have continuing tenure. They were put on 2, 5 and 10 year contracts. In community housing, though, the previous continuing entitlement carried forward. So in a sense, community housing tenants had a stronger claim to tenure. Now, it's recently been changed and the public housing system has reverted back to, I haven't studied the details, but as I understand, that 2, 5 and 10 year tenancy agreement no longer applies and people have continuing ongoing tenancy.
So things can change.
Yes, but
Back in the days when it was 2, 5 and 10 years, the eligibility at the point of entry, which related to your financial and other circumstances, and the eligibility to continue at the end of your 2, 5 and 10 year were different. So that it was much easier for people to sustain their eligibility at the end of those contracts.
So does that answer your question, Karen?
not
Really,
not
I think it's probably better for homes in
It's a
South
kind of-
Wales, yeah.
Maybe-
I know what she was asking. If they're no longer
One of the questions
Yeah.
that came up was,
Yeah.
if you've got life tenancy, you get transferred into a community housing provider, do you actually retain that
Yes.
and then move back? That's the answer.
Yes.
That's
But you're asking if the income goes up and you're not eligible.
if you've been relocated from South Waterloo, if you then gain employment, you're
Yeah.
no longer on the same
Yeah.
benefit that you were on, can you still return to community housing? in South
Yes.
Waterloo?
Tenancy.
Or
No, this is a different question, and I think we need
The
to get
question
a
is,
New South Wales.
if they go into work, for example, they're no longer,
eligible for social housing.
Yeah, I mean, if they're no longer eligible, and I don't know, this is a Home's question to ask, then it might be that they can't even stay where they are. I don't know how that works.
No, they
So
pay market rent.
They pay market rent.
They pay market rent. They pay market rent. And
But I know the
people-
question you're asking, will they have a right to return if they've become, and I don't think we've got
They
an
pay market
immediate
rent, they can stay in public housing, and then
Will
when
they
they
have a right to
retire,
return?
then they go back to the
Yeah,
20%.
It would depend
Yeah.
on whether or not if they're still in social housing, and there's plenty of people in social housing who are earning an income and paying market rent, right?
I don't know that we know the answer.
I don't think we know the answer.
The answer.
The answer
No,
is
no,
not really great question.
It's actually a home policy. We don't know.
Yeah,
So-
it's,
Sorry.
but it's a
Sorry.
very good
Yep.
question to ask homes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Asked about how community housing providers will deal with problems of antisocial
Yes.
behaviour better than homes, and the response was, "Oh, that's not a fair question." And I say it is a fair question because that is the rationale put forward by the government for the whole
I
redevelopment.
see not comparing the two,
Yeah.
but I did answer how we manage it.
So we're asking, where the government has said they're doing the same things to be better to get rid of this dysfunctional community or this failed experiment. So the government said they're doing this to make things better. So it's a fair question to ask, how will it be better?
I hope that I've answered that. Absolutely, and I hope that,
What I'm saying is fair.
You're trying to say we can't answer what Homes does. We
yeah,
can't, because we're not.
we can
in
tell
Homes.
you how
We're
we
not
manage
Homes.
it.
We can't say how they
Whether
manage
it's better
it.
or not is
So I
for
think that
you
was
to
your
decide.
comment.
Yeah.
I want you to reassure
We're
you.
proactive, and I think that my question was,
So
yeah.
Sorry, can I just
No, no.
add to that? If that's what the government say, great, meaning, they acknowledge there are certain things that is better they would deliver. Again, about antisocial behavior, we have some, like each organizations have policies and they're very similar on how we dealt with that, and then we follow, obviously, the Residential Tenancy Act, what steps that needs to follow. But the difference is, at the moment, for us, Metro Quarter as an example, again, we have a specialist support coordinator person who is working locally to be able to nip that in the bud really quickly. So that's just the fact of what's happening in Metro Quarter at the moment. How homes or any CHP later on down the track, obviously that's not a fair enough comparison at the moment because
All we can tell you is how we manage it.
Yes.
We can't, is it better or, we manage it, we're proactive, we try and support vulnerable people, and we work towards trying to get harmony. And as Tash has said, we're accountable under the Residential Tenancies Act.
I think it the supports for people that is somewhat different. Zara? Oh, sorry. Yep. Sorry, I got it right.
Since there will be different providers managing different, say, floors of some building, do you have a plan to harmonise your policy so that the experience of tenant on level 10 and tenant on level 2 in terms of how, say, they come in and you've got X, Y, and Z, and the process for it is governed by policy such and such? Are you planning to harmonise those policies across the board so that everybody living in the same building in the same street has the same experience in terms of service delivery?
Can I attempt to answer that slightly differently?
Mhm.
What we've talked about is aligning or try to line up service standards. So, for example, I can't say whether it's a specific Link Wentworth policy or a beer review policy, but for example, maintenance. Let's take maintenance, everybody's favourite topic, or not. So that, where, if we say there's an urgent repair, that we all follow the same timeline for urgent repairs. We haven't quite worked out if it's one contractor or three, but that we follow the same thing and that we commit to the same standards. Does that make sense? So we've also...
But there's fine print there, right? Because say I acquire a disability and now I need particular fixtures to be into my building, in my flat.
That's a big.
And my provider, let's call them Y, decides that I am not entitled to this change according to their policy that says so. And my neighbor has a similar disability but is managed by a different provider with a different policy. When I want to appeal that decision, I need to refer to the policy, and therefore I'm asking if I will have an equal experience to my neighbor.
So that's an excellent question. I can probably confidently say we haven't worked out that level of detail yet. I can't comment on Waterloo Metro, but I think we've as I said, we've entered into this partnership. We've agreed how we're going to look at things. We've agreed that we'll do some things jointly, and we've agreed to try and do things the same way where it makes sense and wherever possible. I think that's one we can probably take.
They're the sort of things that we'll be working.
It'd be very helpful to hear, I think. Security, yeah.
Yeah, that
Right.
was very good.
The lighting, surveillance, CCTVs.
And also encourage you very much to provide information.
And that's really great point. Would you mind coming and then having a chat with them?
Yeah, this is what, yeah, that's what we're, please.
Yeah.
I'm mentioning that the government or Homes stopped the tenure, or they say they're sending of annual lists. Well, I had one 6 months ago. What happened to that club?
I think it was more recent than 6 months. I should say, I did say to my colleagues I wasn't going to talk much in this meeting. Yeah, look.
Someone there was out of June.
It's a government thing, so and again we agreed that we wouldn't talk about government policy, so we're not inside. But my understanding is that it was more recent than 6 months ago that the government made that change. But again, I welcome you to bring your invite your government reps to come, ask them all these questions. And then to Norrie's point, hear what they say, compare it with what we say, and draw your own distinct conclusions.
Thank you.
So we've reached 7:30. No one's killed anybody, and everybody's behaved well. So thank you very much. Look, I want to thank the CHPs for coming along and braving the night air, as well as Waterloo, which has a bit of a reputation sometimes for acting up. But I think I started by saying this is really an opportunity for you to see who some of the key people are in community housing. They're going to be around at a whole pile of events, etc. To be able to. Yeah, and to have
one more question.
You got one more question. Oh, okay.
Sorry, I posted a couple of questions in the chat earlier, but I'm not sure if there's.
Okay, off you go, Alistair. Give you a couple of minutes. Yeah. The question.
Time. Not exactly sure. Just wanted to follow. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, my internet connection is not very good. I just was hoping that we would hear more about the differences in tenancy management between community housing and public housing. I know Legal Aid has raised some issues around different policies and in tenancy management, as well as in review and appeal processes, and also potentially around allocations. In the recent past, there's been some coverage of the challenges for youth allowance recipients, for instance, getting access to community housing because they're on lower incomes. So just more of that kind of comparing and contrasting so that folks can get a better understanding of the differences between the two types of social housing.
Like a different session.
It's housing pathways. So we allocate through housing pathways. So I'm not sure why youth allowance, why people would, anyone who's eligible for social housing would be allocated a social housing property by a housing pathways provider.
Yeah, I think, Alistair, one of the problems with some of these comparison questions are we don't have someone from Homes here that can actually answer some of the questions, and CHPs are reluctant to compare themselves with what it is that Homes actually do in their way of delivering stuff. That's going to be a challenge for responding to some of these questions going forward. But I think tonight's been a good start in terms of you meeting some of the community housing providers, getting a bit of an idea of what they're doing and how they're doing it. And it really is just the start of a conversation that'll be going on both in the workshops that are being put on by Stockton around the design and of the precinct and buildings, but also going forward to be able to raise some of the questions that you're raising and get responses back to individual CHP. So thanks very much for coming along, and in particular CHPs for coming along and being so frank. Thank you. Thank you.